Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for the invitation. And I will spend the next 40 minutes or so to tell you about a jump into the future, right? What are the problems that we are tackling, and what are our solutions from a scientific perspective? You don't need me to tell you that, well, we need to save the world. We are in the middle of a contingency plan happening, and there is no plan B. There is no planet B. So just a little bit of stats. This was mentioned a few times already this morning. If we look at the world picture, thankfully here in Scandinavia, actually, it's all Scandinavian countries are a fantastic example for all over the world. But if we look globally what is happening, this is a stat that is actually up to 2017. If we push it up to today, well, actually, the picture would not be very, very different. We're actually relying a lot on oil products. We are relying on natural gas. We are relying on types of energy that are not renewable. And, well, the other thing is that how do we cope with CO2 emission? And as you well know, we're doing terribly badly. Actually, we are, as I said before, we are slowly but constantly doing worse and worse. So how do we tackle this issue? Well, I'm pretty sure that many here today have an electric car or an hybrid car. Can you raise your hands? That's excellent. And if we look at the technology that is powering these electric or hybrid vehicles, we would actually look into, if we look into dismantling what's happening in your car, you would see that the battery is actually occupying the full chassis of the car. It's what stays at the bottom. It is massive. If we look at the highest spec car, electric car in the market, we will see that the battery looks exactly like this. It weighs 600 kilograms. Doesn't leave much room for style, design, and things like that. And if you actually happen to travel across one of those bridges, which are not allowed to be passed by trucks, you will see that these cars will not be allowed either. And it's 16 different modules of batteries, and there are about 7,100 batteries like this, like an AA battery that you would have, okay, in your home appliances. This battery would take about 10 hours to be charged at a power station. It will travel about, this is the highest spec car in the market, so it will travel about 600 kilometers on that. But guess what? Batteries have a lifetime. So every once in a while, this battery will have to be changed at a cost of about $10,000. So if we look at how energy is stored, I'm promising to you that I will not be showing any bad graphs or any plots I would not get to with that after lunch. But basically, if we look at ways of storing energy, we're actually heavily reliant on these two building blocks. This is a graph that shows you on the y-axis the energy density, and on the x-axis, the power density, okay? So effectively, how much energy I can store and how fast I can charge and discharge. And the market nowadays is kind of overtaken by two types of energy storage devices. You would have the supercaps on the right-hand side and the batteries on the left-hand side. Let's focus first on the supercaps. Typically, they can store much lower energy as compared to batteries, but their advantage is that they can charge very, very fast. Normally, the market, you can find this in small appliances, things that need to be charged very, very fast, even if they don't store much energy. So all these electric knives or hoovers that you would have at home, typically they will be powered by supercaps. If we look at a larger scale application, we have to go all the way back to China. And they have buses which are powered by supercaps. They cannot store much energy. They can go literally from stop to stop. By the time the passengers leave the bus and will jump in, the bus will charge we'll just pull out this charging station there, and we'll charge just enough to go to the next bus stop, and over and over and over. So this is something sustainable in a very, very short 3 to 4 kilometers range. So what happens is, what happens in the conventional batteries instead? As you can see in this graph, we can store way more energy, but the problem with batteries is that they charge very, very slowly. And we all know what the problems with batteries are, right? They don't last very long. We buy a laptop, it will last full 8 hours on the one power, on the one battery, when we buy it. 6 months later, they will last 2 hours. A year later, you will have to change it. So this is what batteries are. And actually, how a battery is made of electrodes, materials that are making the electrodes. And normally, in a battery, what you would have is a reaction happening between these two electrodes and a liquid medium which contains lithium, for example. What happens to the electrodes when you charge it and discharge it is exactly what we have in the breakout game back in the Atari, those of you who remember this game. So every time lithium ions get stored into the electrode will just break. They will make a hole, and then another one, until, if you actually look at a battery that has been used for hundreds of times, it will be just all broken apart. So if we look, for example, this is a microscopy image of an electrode of a battery that was pristine. You see, it's wonderfully perfect. If I show you the same electrode of a battery that was used 100 times, that's what it looks like. It's completely cracked already. And if I look at the same electrode material after 500 cycles, it looks like that. It breaks apart. It's literally pulverized. And this is the reason why you have to go ahead and buy a new battery or a new laptop, for example. So I told you that batteries can store more energy than supercaps. This is true. But it's not enough energy that we can store, if I have to tell you the truth. So this is the example of the largest battery in the planet. It is located in Alaska, and it's occupying a football pitch in area. So it's quite large, it's quite massive. So if power goes off in this little town in Alaska, this battery would be able to just give enough power to a population of about 17,000 people for 7 minutes. That's all. So this is the state of the art. And this is the largest battery in the planet. So what? We need to find alternatives, and we need to find them quick, right? So our solution in my lab is working with nanomaterials. Nanomaterials, materials that are a billionth of a meter in size. This example here, graphene, is the thinnest, the lightest, the strongest object ever made. It is harder than diamond, 300 times stronger than steel. It conduces electricity better than copper. It is only 1 atom thick. So we're talking about 1,000,000 times thinner than a human hair in thickness. So what is the wonderful thing about graphene? Well, it was discovered about 12 years ago by 2 colleagues at the University of Manchester who got the Nobel Prize for this discovery. It is a material that was thought to be unstable, so not possible to make. But they were quite stubborn, so what they did was they took some graphite, which you have in your pencils, is effectively the material your pencils lead. They took some Scotch tape, and they started peeling off layer after layer out of these graphite stacked layers. And eventually, they went to the microscope, and they found that they had isolated graphene, which is 1 atom thick material made of carbon. And effectively, what they did was, imagine you have a book, and you are taking 1 page out of that book. This is graphene. And of course, you understand that the way they isolated graphene, they made graphene for the first time, is not very viable in terms of upscalability, right? Try to go, I don't know, to a major industry. I don't know, I work a lot with Intel, and we go, you know, we have a wonderful material, now hire 100,000 minions there and start exfoliating. It's not possible. So what we worked in my lab was to find a very cheap, easy, upscalable way of making graphene in very large scale. And it's exactly what we did. So we bought kilograms of graphite that you can buy very, very cheap. It's about 30 euro per kilogram. And we selected some very nice solvents. I don't know why this is upside down. It played well before. So this is a vial. Anyway, you put the graphite in there. You give a little shake. If you have the right material, that will be giving you a very nice dispersion. So I'm not sure whether you will be able to see it, especially far away. We have a camera, so the ones who are watching us on video will be able to see. So this is an example of one of those graphene dispersions. We call them inks, right? And effectively, we managed a way also to upscale that production. A company based in the UK, Thomas Swan, came to us, and they said, we want to put money in your research, and we want to upscale. We want to go from a few milliliters to massive scale. So what happened was we put together a project of a couple of years with this company, and we came to develop a methodology to actually bring this to a larger scale. So the BBC News picked up this, and they said, well, then you can make graphene in a kitchen blender. You can do it, and there are loads of videos on YouTube. In scientific world, kitchen blender is a shear mixer. And effectively, this is what it is. So we upscaled it, and now the company can produce it in tanks. There are about 1,000 liters each batch. So it's a sort of next step of upscaling. But it's not all there. Effectively, this opened our world on the fact that there are a lot of other layered crystals in nature. There are a lot of other building blocks in chemistry. There are layered like graphite and can be exfoliated like we did with graphene. And some of them are metals, some of them are insulators, some of them are semiconducting. I've just named the 3 building blocks of electronics, by the way. And they all have a lot of other properties, including properties that are very, very important for energy storage. So what we have done is we've been working on exfoliating all these other materials. It's like having a zoo of different classes of materials, exactly like we have different classes of animal species. And we can exfoliate them. We can make them inks like this one, pretty much with any of them. So what do we do in my lab, and how do we tackle the energy storage challenge? So for example, this is, because these materials are ultra thin, only the thickness of an atom, we make them in liquid so we can process them very, very easily. They are transparent. They are easy to manipulate. What we've done, for example, we have made very large-scale supercapacitors, which are flexible and completely transparent. This is, for example, a fully assembled supercapacitor. And in the picture below is overimposed on my scientist, on my postdoc mobile phone. So you can see that the transparency is just preserved. And effectively, you have something that you can power there. You have something that can charge the storage. And how much storage? Well, again, I promised you not to get too much into the science, and I will not. But if I show you this graph, this is the proof that these devices work. And as a scientist, as an electrochemist, if I look at a graph like that, for me, it would be better than a Picasso. This graph tells me that that device there can store energy and can actually is sufficient to power up already that smartphone. And it's completely transparent, can be embedded into the actual phone in a seamless way. What about lifetime? Well, actually, again, I'm not going to go into details of this, but basically this is a graph that shows you the capacitance, the areal capacitance, how much charge I can store per area, per unit area. And here I have cycle numbers. You can see thousands. Basically tells you that I can retain energy storage behavior for not 100 cycles, not 500 cycles, but for 24,000 cycles there, 90% of the performance of that device is retained. So you would not have to change this device in your lifetime, or in your children's lifetime, or in your children's lifetime. So this is quite promising. And we have stepped a little further, and we wanted to make sure that we wanted to develop something that was easy to prototype once again, and gave us the chance to test these magic inks in a very, very fast way. So what we did was we actually developed a very, very easy way of prototyping. We can 3D print stamps with any shape that you want. So here you have some very interesting shapes, as well as what we call this is interdigitated devices, because they can store more energy, they show more surface. And what you need to do is literally dip your stamp into your ink and then stamp it away, and there you will have your energy storage device. Or we 3D printed this roll as well, which has some interesting interdigitated geometry. And again, you can dip it into your ink and stamp it away. Exactly what the Babylonians did with their cylinders in the 1800 before Christ. So what they did, we developed exactly the same concept. You have the opportunity to develop the shape, the morphology, the geometry that you want, and stamp it away. And this is especially applicable to all these communities where that don't have much access to sophisticated machinery. Again, this graph shows, as the one before, that yes, these devices do work. They are extremely thin. You can stamp them within a fraction of a second, and yet they do work perfectly. And we pushed it a little further, and you know, aside from the energy storage revolution, we are at the moment also facing another revolution in terms of manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is strongly growing into our societies. And what we did was, because we have inks, we have loaded these inks into printers, exactly the same printers you would have in your offices. And what you can do is you can print electronics pretty much with the geometry that you want, with the morphology that you want, and you can print them in any single fashion. So here we have some logos. These are working devices. And also, we can show here that they're scratch resistant, and you can basically use some Scotch tape there, and it comes clean. It's all perfectly stable. We've also actually we've been able to print them on textiles. Again, I'm not sure whether you can see it because we work with tiny things, but again, maybe the camera is there for our streaming, will be able to see it a little bit better. These are devices that are printed on cotton. And this opens a new field for smart clothing. And all these things that will need to be powered up, sensors that we will be able to actually have just embedded in our T-shirt, and so forth. So this is quite an interesting step forward. And if we look, this is the graph that compares the performance of our devices with all the other works that have been reported out there in scientific literature with similar devices. And we are at the very, very top of different types of printing. And again, as I said at the beginning, these devices are fully flexible. They do not lose their storage capabilities even when you bend them. And we've taken a step further. As you know, additive manufacturing has upscaled again, as another step forward into 3D printing. And what we are doing is we are going from 2D to 3D. And effectively, we are growing on height and thickness in our devices. Why is that? because if we have an higher thickness on everything we print, we have more material. And if we have more material, we can store more energy. Simple as that. And that's why we are now moving on to the 3D printing stage. And these are similar devices to the ones I showed you before, but they are about 1 millimeter thick in terms of what we print on top. And this shows that going from 10 nanometers to 1 millimeter, so 2 orders of magnitude in height, we can already store 30% more energy. And we can print them, again, in any sort of morphology. So this is a grid of pyramids, and we can grow more surface, more materials, more energy. And this is a magnified image of one of these pillars. What about batteries? So all of this was supercaps, which is where we've shown that we're massively improving what we have available. What about batteries? Well, batteries are a little bit more complex in terms of what we want is, we want batteries to be smaller, lighter. So again, we want to increase the volumetric performance, the higher volumetric performance, and we want them to last longer. We don't want to go through the problem of replacing batteries every once in a while. So silicon has been proposed in the field as one of the materials that could actually replace the materials that you're currently using in your batteries. Has the highest theoretical capacity. Around all the materials palette around is the material that can store more energy. And it's very abundant in art. So, wonderful. So why don't we use it already? Well, the problem with batteries is that if you want to store a lot of energy, similarly to what I said before, we want to make sure that we make our electrode thick. And what is the problem there? The problem is that we want these electrodes, these films that you deposit, to be electrically conductive. Current is a charge that goes, okay, that flows. So we need an electrical conductor that brings this flow around. And we want it to have mechanically stable. Okay? The problem is that the all battery industry is facing at the moment is when they try the batteries to store more energy, they make the electrode thicker, but they come to a sort of what we call critical thickness, okay? Critical cracking thickness. This electrode starts falling apart. It cracks. And on top of that, we have another problem with lithium. The problem is that when we charge it and discharge it, lithiate it and delithiate it, the silicon would undergo to a volumetric expansion and then compression. So effectively, after the second time you use that battery, the electrode will pulverize. So it's very, very bad. So theoretically, it's a fantastic material. Practically, it's very bad. So in the field, there are a lot of solutions for that to improve the problem. And what the best that the field has managed was to add an electrical conductor and to add a polymeric binder, what we call polymeric binder, a polymer that gives mechanical stability to the electrode. This works up to some extent, is not an ideal case. So what we have done, we have replaced these two extra things that the community normally has with a two-dimensional material, to one of these flat materials. So what we create is what we call composites in these electrodes of silicon particles, what really is capable of retaining the charge, and, excuse me, 2D materials that are extremely high electrical conductors, and they are very, very robust in mechanical performance. So by doing that, we have managed to make record thicknesses, record thick. So these are two materials that are, for example, used in normal batteries, in the batteries that you have all in your smartwatches, mobile phones, and so forth. If you see that, this is the left-hand side is the picture of an electrode without 2D materials. So this is the maximum thickness that the community can get, 280 microns. But if you use our 2D systems, we can go up to 800 microns, way, way thicker, and yet doesn't crack. Does it perform? Oh, yes. We test everything in coin cell batteries, which is a very, very easy way recognized by the industry, the battery industry, and we manufacture them exactly in the same way. We make a slurry, and we make these devices exactly the same way battery industries make them. And this is a range of performances. This is the aerial capacitance as well, as a function of cycling. And I will not go too much into details, but I will actually draw your attention to the bottom line. The commercial cells, the ones that you use, are capable of storing at the most 4 milliamps hour per centimeter square, while our systems go up to 20 milliamps hour per centimeter square. So we have improved massively. Where are we? Well, and what is coming next? So this is a graph that shows you performance in terms of aerial capacitance, specific energy, energy density, all in the right-hand side of this graph. And you will see the red, the blue are performances of our batteries, what we make. And as you can see, they're state-of-the-art in performance. We are about 7 to 8 times higher energy storage capabilities in terms of anything comparable in the market. What we are lacking of? We're lacking of, in this particular case, charge. We cannot charge them very, very fast. We can accumulate 8 times more energy. They are 8 times lower charging, so we need to improve that, and we have to improve the lifetime, the cycling life. Also, what we're doing is we're bringing all this know-how, and we're bringing this into the 3D printing, additive manufacturing methodology. And we are also printing batteries as well as supercaps. Where are we going next? Lithium is not abundant in the planet. We are too heavily reliant on lithium-ion batteries, and everything I've shown you so far is based on lithium-ion technology. And we want things to be cleaner, and lithium-ion batteries are not that clean yet because they're explosive, they're based on flammable solvents and things like that. That's why every once in a while you hear about a battery blowing up. This is the reason, about the liquid that is there and the fact that we use lithium. So we have the shorter term, I would say, from a technological perspective, from a science perspective, you have the grand challenge, which is the one to replace lithium altogether, and the low-hanging fruit. We have fixed the low-hanging fruit. We now know how to push the lithium-ion battery technology. What's next is applying all the know-how that we have to other types of batteries that can replace lithium, so going away from lithium. So we can apply all our know-how to sodium batteries, magnesium batteries, aluminum batteries, and so forth. And this should be a smoother transition than we have had so far. So here, I'll show you a sort of a screenshot of the 10 disruptive battery technologies that were proposed in 2018. The picture hasn't changed that much. Effectively, we are going to see more about magnesium batteries. Silicon-based batteries, as you see, was already a big challenge in 2018. I showed you that in 2019, we already solved that issue. And we're going to other types of ways of storing energy beyond lithium. This is a sort of table that shows you what are the winning technologies, the ones where we see the transition can easily happen. And you see the nickel zinc, the potassium ion instead of lithium ion, silicon-based technologies to replace the materials that you currently have in your systems and so forth. So the energy storage field is actively working, and we get improvements on a daily basis. So I hope I showed you that we have indeed made some substantial progress, and we are indeed, you're going to hear very, very soon about further breakthroughs, because we don't stop. And everything we have shown you already has been patented, has been licensed. We have moved on even, and we have even more impressive things coming up. Recently, I was appointed by the European Commission to the board, the advisory board of the European Innovation Council. And the purpose of the European Innovation Council would be to bring a lot of this amazing science that happens in labs to the next step. So we will be engaging with investors, and we need you guys to take more risk, because this is absolutely worth it. And with this, I end, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Valeria. That was really, really interesting. Now, you probably know that Norwegians are self-proclaimed battery experts, since we own all these electric cars and have all these cell phones and everything. Surely your technology can be used at different areas. Mm-hmm. What are the possibilities with the nano batteries that you're working on?
You will see, soon enough, you will start seeing, again, as I said before, there are low-hanging fruit options and opportunities for this type of battery technologies. You will see, probably you will see the electric cars field being a second step, because it will require a further upscaling. But everything that involves literally smaller scale batteries, from laptops to mobile phones, e-clothing, everything that actually is powered by lower scale batteries is already an opportunity. And you will not be late to see that. I'd say when I'm asked when we will see this in the market, normally you would see scientists being very, very cautious. So a decade, 15 years. You would not be late in this. I'd say 5 years and earlier than that.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this room is full of people who are really interested in investing their money in great projects. What would you advise them to look for when they look for projects to invest in?
Well, look for real challenges. Don't be scared about how large a field is and what the longer term return might come, because this is an absolute sure. It's about taking the risk, and scientists sometimes what scientists do is completely disconnected from what investors do, and sometimes we need an opportunity for the scientists to start looking more broadly how their science could be applied, and at the same time investors being a little bit more keen to open their eyes to different opportunities. A lot of the great research coming in the labs, from the labs, it's at a non-upscalable stage, and needs further investment to bring it up. That's why the European Innovation Council is also looking into that. But yeah, it's about finding a middle range opportunity. Mm-hmm.
Like I said initially when I presented you, I said that you had a major breakthrough last summer. When do you think that your battery will be on the market for all of us to use?
As I said, it will not be too long. It will not. Before you realize, it will be already up in your devices. I'd say sooner than 5 years, certainly.
Okay. And the electronic business might not love you at this moment?
Might not. The electronic business will always find a way of selling more despite the energy storage device. In fact, that would be a selling point sometimes. A lot of actually what we have done is been in collaboration with industrial partners. And personally, as a scientist, I find working with industry extremely good, because they give us real challenges and we respond. So this is that sort of and so this particular, the battery results that I showed you, that breakthrough, was actually coming from an industry-academia collaboration, and they're taking the lead straight on now in upscaling and commercializing it. So yeah.
Great, great. We had a question. What about the natural materials needed for making the batteries, minerals and what have you? Will we have enough, is the question. What about the mines and the workers?
Absolutely. If you look at the graphene, comes from graphite, and graphite is one of the most abundant material on Earth. There are plenty of mines, pretty much actually spread around in Asia, South America, and so forth. So you don't have a country that has is overpowering other countries and things like that. So it's graphite is a very abundant material. The other materials in the zoo of 2D crystals that I showed you before, most come from minerals. Molybdenite and so forth. These are all materials that we have had there for centuries. And we didn't realize we could manipulate them at small scale, exactly how we did with graphene, until a few years ago. So these are very, very abundant materials in nature.
Great. Thank you so much, Valeria Nicolosi.
Thank you.